Today's story is about a tragic story of a young newlywed woman who was assaulted and killed. This incident took place in a village within the disclosed rural area and is a true story of murder. For privacy reasons, the village name isn't disclosed here as it involves a sensitive assault and murder case. Please kindly understand this decision. Before getting into the story, please take a moment to like and share our channel. The story begins like this. In a small village known for its farming, there lived a young married couple, Wesley and Hazel, who had recently settled there. During the chickpea harvest season, Wesley would go to town to sell the chickpeas, often staying overnight. Now that chickpea season had arrived, Wesley had to leave his wife and head to town for business, though he didn't want to leave her alone.
Don't stay in town too long, okay? Come back quickly. I don't know anyone else in this village yet,
She said, and holding on to her husband, Hazel urged him to return soon, as she was not yet familiar with anyone in the village. Reassuring her, Wesley promised.
Don't worry, my love. I'll return as soon as I'm done. You'll be fine with Father here to keep you company.
Reluctantly, he went on his way, unaware that this farewell would be their last. Had they known, Wesley might never have left. That night, an eerie silence fell, broken only by a woman's chilling scream.
No, please, don't help me!
The desperate scream belonged to a woman, thrown into the river, struggling until she submerged completely. In the morning, a vegetable seller woman arrived at the bridge and noticed something floating in the river below. To her horror, she realized it was a woman's body, face down in the water. Terrified, she ran back to inform the villagers and authorities. Upon inspection, the villagers whispered among themselves, "Isn't that Wesley's wife? They only just married recently, how could this happen?" The village officers soon arrived and began asking questions. When he inquired about Wesley and Hazel's presence in the village, the villagers explained all they knew. Wesley was summoned, but since he had gone to town for business, he wasn't there. His father was present. Wesley's father was known to be an old man with a heavy drinking habit, especially during certain times of the year. The officer went to question Wesley's father, who replied calmly,
Yes, Hazel was my daughter-in-law. She married my son not long ago.
And where is your son?
asked the officer.
He went to town a few days ago to sell chickpeas.
Wesley's father replied.
So, at the time of the incident, he wasn't in the village?
The officer confirmed.
That's right.
Wesley's father responded. The officer then asked,
When was the last time you saw her?
About 6 p.m., when she asked me if I'd like to have dinner. He replied, adding that he hadn't felt well and thus hadn't eaten.
Thanking him, the officer left. Wesley, upon returning to the village, learned the terrible news about his wife and broke down, asking his father.
Father, what happened? How did my wife die while I was away?
Wesley's father was at a loss for words, patting his son's shoulder in a gesture of consolation. Unbeknownst to them, the officer had been observing them from the shadows. Meanwhile, two young men, Mike and Brooks, were fishing late at night by the river. Emboldened by alcohol, they dared to venture where no one else did since Hazel's death had tainted the bridge as a haunted place. Suddenly, Mike's fishing hook snagged something heavy. Thinking he had caught a fish, he eagerly pulled it in, only to realize he'd hooked the remains of Hazel, now eerily visible in the water. Terrified, they fled the scene. Since that night, rumors spread that Hazel's spirit haunted the riverbank, preventing villagers from visiting the area after dark. The village became gripped with fear, not only of the murderer, but of her restless spirit. The officer kept investigating, keeping an eye on Asher, a suspicious villager who had allegedly harassed Hazel before her death. The village became gripped with fear, not only of the murderer, but of her restless spirit. The officer kept investigating, keeping an eye on Asher, a suspicious villager who had allegedly harassed Hazel before her death. One night, as he observed Asher rushing anxiously to the place where Hazel died, he quickly caught and restrained him. When asked why he came here alone, Asher replied that he had been summoned by Gary to this spot. As he was explaining, Gary arrived. The chief asked why the two of them were confronting each other in this place. Gary explained, "Wesley made me call Asher to come here." While Gary was speaking, Wesley appeared and grabbed Asher by the neck. "You killed my wife. It was you," he accused. Asher struggled and shouted, "Your wife's death has nothing to do with me. When she died, I wasn't even in the village. I was hiding because I couldn't pay off my gambling debts." No matter what Asher said, Wesley didn't let go of his grip on Asher's neck, so the chief and Gary had to step in to pull him away. As they were trying to calm Wesley down, a voice suddenly rang out. It was the voice of Hazel. When they looked toward the bridge where the voice came from, they all saw Hazel sitting and crying on the bridge. While everyone was stunned, Wesley ran to the bridge, eager to reach his wife. But when he got closer, no one was there. Broken and desolate, Wesley collapsed on the bridge in tears, haunted by the spirit of his beloved wife. Seeing this, the officer resolved to pursue justice and get to the bottom of Hazel's tragic death. Though Wesley could not speak, the officer sensed that something critical remained hidden within Wesley's father's guarded demeanor. Determined, he vowed to uncover the truth behind the shadows veiling this tragic mystery. Even though the police chief escorted Wesley home, he remained silent, brooding alone. Later, the chief approached Wesley's father for any new information, but Wesley's father repeated what he'd already said, leaving the chief with no new leads. As the chief left, Wesley sat in quiet despair, unable to speak. Wesley's father, however, seemed to be hiding something, gazing thoughtfully at the chief as he departed. On his way back, the chief sensed that something was off, though he couldn't pinpoint what. He wondered if Wesley's father was the killer. How could anyone assault and kill his own daughter-in-law? While pondering these questions, he saw a young woman nearby, sobbing. The chief approached her to ask.
"What's wrong, young lady?"
As soon as he asked, Hazel's spirit entered his body, and, possessed by her spirit, he returned to confront Wesley's father. Wesley's father was digging a pit when the chief approached. Upon seeing him, Wesley's father asked,
"Why have you come back?"
In an unrecognizable voice, Hazel's spirit in the chief's body replied,
"So you don't remember me, do you? I've come to end you, old man."
and lunged at Wesley's father's neck. Shocked and panicking, Wesley's father struggled as the chief strangled him. Wesley, hearing the commotion, rushed down to find the chief strangling his father. Shocked, the Hazel spirit retracted when she saw Wesley, leaving her with a mixture of sorrow and guilt. She gently explained the whole story to Wesley, who was stunned, unable to process the horrifying truth. That evening, around 6:30 p.m., Hazel returned to her home in the village. When she arrived, Wesley's father, in a drunken stupor, grew furious, yelling at her for being out so late. Hazel calmly explained she had been helping with cherry preparations at the monastery. But intoxicated, Wesley's father followed her, harboring impure intentions. His desire overtook him as he watched her enter her room. He followed her in and pinned her from behind, ignoring her protests as she resisted, asking,
"What are you doing?"
"Just once. Please let me do."
he whispered, promising he'd tell no one. Hazel resisted, slapping him and asking if he remembered that she was his daughter-in-law. This infuriated Wesley's father, and in a rage, he struck her with a bottle, knocking her unconscious. Driven by his animal instincts, he assaulted her before discarding her body in the village creek. Discovering the full story, Wesley was overwhelmed with shock, sorrow, and disbelief. At that moment, Hazel's spirit appeared and pushed Wesley's father into the pit he had been digging, where he impaled himself on his own sharp tools, dying instantly. Afterward, in memory of his beloved wife, Wesley built a stupa in her honor. The tragic tale of Wesley and Hazel lives on in the village, a reminder of compassion and a warning about the perils of overindulgence in alcohol, which can lead one to commit irreversible mistakes. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe.